Hello and welcome to this game review. So it started with the Queen's Gambit decline, a very standard variation, bishop e7, castles, very solid, knight c3, castles. Here white played bishop d3, which isn't very accurate. The point is, black's plan is always, well, not always, but one of the black plans is to take here, play a6, b5, bishop b7 and c5 to get rid of his problems, and then the problems being the bad bishop and also the pawn on c7. And if black manages to do all of this, he might even get an advantage because white has a problem with his bishop on c1 whenever he has played e3. So because of this, white usually doesn't move this bishop because he wants to recapture on c4 in one move. Therefore, he makes a bunch of useful moves beforehand, for example b3, bishop b2, queen c2 or something, and only develop the bishop after black takes on c4 or whenever he is out of useful moves. Of course, black can play something like c5 and the game will have a different character, but this is one of the main plans. Now after bishop d3, black correctly takes here, but then black plays this move c6, which is not a very good move and it doesn't really do anything. Again, if we understand what black is trying to do, he wants to develop this bishop, right? If he doesn't develop this bishop, he will be steadily worse. So c6 only drops this diagonal, makes the diagonal unviable, and the black should also attack the center, right? So either c5 now, or play a6, for example, with the idea to play b5, and bishop b7 and c5 next, and knight d7 or knight c6, black will have developed all of his pieces, and black will enjoy a very good game. This is basically the idea of the Queen's Gambit accepted, and this is one of the ways to play it. But instead, with c6, now black is assuming a very passive position. Okay, castles b6. So black wants to develop the bishop like this, but this takes a lot of time, and just exchanging bishops won't really fight for the center. White takes the center with two pawns, and white is of course better. After bishop a6, bishop d3 is a bit of a strange move, but it works out as well. At this point, again, black's only plan is to play c5, so okay, queen c7, e5, white plays aggressively, black has to go knight e5. At this point, white decided to play bishop g5, but he should have now already decided on the structure with knight takes d5. As we will see later, this will become a very good version of the French advanced structure because black's pieces on the queen side are not developed. Black has also played this b6 move, which weakens the square on c6, which means the knight on c6 is not very stable, and black has no pressure on the d4 square, which makes it a good version for white, as he can either attack on the king side or take the c-file, as happens in the game. After bishop g5, black had a chance to not allow this and take here, with the point that if the queen takes back, we can play c5 or just attack the weakness on d8, on d4, and if here we just play c5, we play knight c6 or d7, depending on what white does, and black has a decent version of some kind of Grunfeld structure where he will take here and have a 2-on-1 majority on the king side, the queen side. And h6 is a bit cooperative. Now white finds a very good move, taking on d5 while he has the chance. Also, it's worth mentioning this structure is not very pleasant for black. He will try to get c5 in, but this will weaken d5, while white's plan, if he gets f4, f5, he will basically be winning, as the king side is vacated by black's pieces. Rook a cd, rook a c1, so white finds the correct plan of attacking on the c-file, queen b7, and now a big mistake by white, bishop d2. This is hard to understand why white would think this bishop is better than this one. The structure and the pawns in the center suggest that white's bishop is the bad one and black's bishop is the good one. Not to mention, tempo is also an important thing in chess, and going back loses time. If white had taken here and started doubling on the c-file, black would have an extremely uncomfortable game, after rook c1 and queen c2, black's pieces would have troubles developing. White would eventually invade on c7, and white is quite a bit better in this structure because he has the c file, which is the only open file. After bishop d2, now black gets to develop a little bit. Bishop rook c2 I mean. Now black gets to fight for the c file as white has lost time. After rook fc1 and taking, white makes another mistake, taking back with the rook, and here again we should be able to fight for the c file with queen c2, and the point is to not allow rook to c8, and again white is in control here, and white should be a bit better. Black has no real counterplay, and white has the c file. But okay, rook c2, and after rook c8, now black's problems are behind him. He has the better bishop, he didn't lose the c file, and he should be kind of fine. h3, now knight b8 was played, which is a nice move. This knight on d7 was poorly placed, and now it's going to c6 eventually. Knight h2, white is trying to attack on the king side, but unfortunately with so many pieces off the board this will not really work. So the queens are getting exchanged. Queen d3, but now black is taking over with queen c4, and if white had taken here he would be fine, but now black has this majority on the queen side while this pawn cannot really move, and this bishop is still quite a bad piece. Queen g3, white is trying to attack on the king side, but the pawn on h6 is less important than the one on d4, so black should have just taken. And after this there is this check on d1 and the bishop f8, for example, and black is close to winning because the knight is coming to c6. White has no attack. As mentioned, we cannot really attack when there are no pieces on the board, and black has no weaknesses, but black decided to not allow anything, which is kind of practical but not objectively the best, when as a rule not all attacks should be working, right? This isn't really an attack, this is just one threat, which isn't really a big threat, it's just a pawn on h6, after which bishop f8 defends from whatever threats there were. Also, another interesting geometrical way to defend is to play queen a2 with the point that after this we can play queen b1 and then, for example, queen g6, though this is less ambitious than bishop f8. Okay, after king h7, black is still a bit better. Queen c3 is a good find by white, acquiescing to the exchange after all. Knight c6 and the exchanges, but now black is a bit better. White should develop his knight back to the game, but not to g4. This just hangs the pawn on d4. After knight f3 the game would still go on. Here knight f3, but black is a bit better because he has the majority, he has a good path for his king, and an easy game. After knight g4, now black is also a pawn ahead. f4, knight f5. There's no real reason to walk around with the knight so much, and one of the key endgame principles is king activation. Here black could have activated his king somewhere to e4. Of course, if it gets to e4 the game is just over. White shouldn't allow this, but either way the king will be better placed on g6. Knight f5 and bishop c5 just to move the opponent's king to the center. Knight e7, this is not very good technique. Black should again involve his king, which is sitting on h7. King f3, h5, b5, and after knight e5, and here black just gets a winning pawn endgame after bishop takes e3, but somehow he decides not to go for it. At this point black does have 8 minutes, which is plenty to calculate some lines, and after knight takes e3 we should always, by the way, look for pawn endgames. King e3 and the specific move h4, black is easily winning because he will pick up this pawn on f4, or at least exchange it for the one on g5, while white's counterplay with these pawns is not fast enough. King g6 also works, but this allows g4, though of course with a pawn up, most pawn endgames are winning anyway. But okay, after a6, black is still close to winning, and after f5 the king is allowed to enter, and this will make black's life quite a bit easier. After king g4, the king is even more active, and from here the position basically won itself. The king just picked up some pawns, and the rest of the game is not entirely interesting. Black promoted, and there is no stalemate either. So an interesting game. Black played the opening quite passively, but then with white's passive play he managed to outplay the opponent.